T.S. Eliot. Life, work, style, awards and recognitions. Life. He was lived in between 1888 to 1965. His full name Thomas Stearns Eliot, a poet, dramatist, literary critic and modernist. He was born in Missouri on September 26, 1888. His father Henry Ware Eliot was the president of the Hydraulic Brake Company. His mother Charlotte Champers Stearns was a volunteer at the Humanity Club of St. Louis. He lived in St. Louis during the first 18 years of his life and attended Harvard University. His education was done at Harvard University. In 1910, he left the United States for the Sorbonne, having earned both undergraduate and master's degrees and having contributed several poems to the Harvard Advocate. After a year in Paris, he returned to Harvard to pursue a doctorate in philosophy, but returned to Europe and settled in England in 1914. He belongs to United States, but he settled in England in the year 1914. The following year, he married Vivian Highwood and began working in London, first as a teacher and later for Lloyd's Bank. As a teacher, he worked in the bank. It was in London that Eliot came under the influence of his contemporary Ezra Pound, who recognized his poetic genius at once and assisted in the publication of his work in a number of magazines. Eliot's friend ആയിരുന്നു എസ്ട്രാ പൗണ്ട്. ഇദ്ദേഹത്തിന് പോയറ്റിക് ഈ ഒരു ഫീൽഡിലുള്ള പ്രാവീണ്യം കണ്ടെത്തുകയും അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് പബ്ലിക്കേഷനും കാര്യങ്ങൾക്കൊക്കെ അസിസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്തു. അങ്ങനെ ഒരുപാട് മാഗസിൻസിൽ ഒരുപാട് വർക്ക്സ് പബ്ലിഷ് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിച്ചു. In 1927, he became a British citizen. After a notoriously unhappy first marriage, Eliot separated from his first wife in 1933 and was remarried to Valerie Fletcher in 1956. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ഫസ്റ്റ് മാരേജ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഒരു ഫെയിലിയർ ആയിരുന്നു. 1933 അദ്ദേഹം ഡിവോഴ്സ് ആവുകയും അതിനുശേഷം 56 അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ 70ാമത്തെ വയസ്സിൽ അദ്ദേഹത്തിനേക്കാൾ ഒരു 30+ ഏജ് ഡിഫറൻസ് ഉള്ള, അതായത് ഒരു 36 ഓർ സംതിങ് ആ ഒരു ഏജ് ഡിഫറൻസ് ഉള്ള ഫ്ലെച്ചറിനെ വിവാഹം ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്തു 1956. In 1948, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature. In 1965, he died in London. Eliot's works, Prufrock and Other Observations, published in 1970. Arrow's Spread, 1919. Republished in the US as poems in 1920. The Sacred Wood in 1920. The Wasteland, one of the important work of Eliot, 1922. Homage to John Dryden, 1924. Poems, 1909 to 1920, includes The Hollow Men, was published in the year 1925. Sweeney Agonistes in Criterion, published in 1926. For Langlet Andrews, 1928. Ash Wednesday, 1930. Annabeth is a poem by St. John Peirce. Eliot translation done in the year 1930. Selected Essays, 1917 to 32, was published in 1932. The Use of Poetry and the Use of Criticism was published in 1933. After Strange Gods, 1933, Lectures at the University of Virginia, done in the year 1934. The Rock, a Pagan play, published in 1934. Murder in the Cathedral, done in the year 1935. Essays, Ancient and Modern, 1936. Collected Poems, 1909 to 1935, includes Burnt Norton, 1936. The Family Reunion, 1939. Old Possum's Book of Practical Cans, 1939. The Ideas of a Christian Society 1939, East Cocker 1940, The Dry Salvages 1941, Little Gidding 1942, Notes Towards the Definition of Culture 1948, The Cocktail Party 1949, The Complete Poems and Plays 1909 to 1950 was published in 1952, The Confidential Plug 1954, On Poetry and Poets 1957, The Elder Statesman 1957, Collected Poems 1909 to 1962 was published in the year 1963. Posthumous publications were The Wasteland, the facsimile and the transcript of the original drafts, including the annotations of Ezra Pound, edited and with an introduction by Valerie Eliot, 1971, Inventions of the March Year, Poems, 1909 to 1917, featuring previously unpublished works edited by Christopher Riggs in the year 1996. First period, 1911 to 1922. 1911, The Love Song of Alfred Prufrock, the first masterpiece of modernism in English. This Love Song of Alfred Prufrock, the first masterpiece of modernism in English. 1970, Prufrock and Other Observations, first volume of poetry. The Love Song of Alfred Prufrock. This poem marked the start of Eliot's career as one of the 20th century's most influential poets. Prufrock is about a lonely, timid, middle-aged man who, lacking self-confidence, wants to propose marriage to a lady but was afraid to do so and ultimately does not. This poem showed that he was influenced by French symbolism, and his attention to the predicament of modern civilization and mood post-war disillusionment appeared in this poem. Second period, 1922, The Wasteland, Eliot's epochal masterpiece, a representative work of the high modernism of the 1920s. 1925, The Hollow Man, the spiritual and emotional aridity of modern man, exhibiting a pessimism. The Wasteland, 433 lines, mainly free verse, many quoted lines in German, French, Italian, and references and allusions to English writers as Spenser, Shakespeare, Milton, and Goldsmith, with many explanatory notes. A picture of the spiritual ruins in Europe shortly after the end of World War I and expressed the disillusionment of a generation of intellectuals, a landmark in English poetry, ending the Romantic period and signifying the emergence of modernism. അപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം മോഡേൺ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് റൈറ്റേഴ്സ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മോഡേൺ ഇംഗ്ലീഷ് ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിന്റെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു വ്യക്തിയാണ്. നമുക്ക് ഇദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ വർക്ക്സിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ മനസ്സിലാവുന്നുണ്ട്. തേർഡ് പീരീഡിൽ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട വർക്ക് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് 1930 Ash Wednesday, 1943 Four Quarters, Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948, Literary Criticism, Selected Essays 1932, The Uses of Poetry 1933, On Poetry and Poets 1957, etc. 1937 to 35 to 58 Verse Plays, Murder in the Cathedral. Style. Eliot's poetry is difficult to read. For one reason, the images and symbols seem very much disconnected, and another obvious source of difficulty lies in his learned quotations and allusions. To appreciate him, it is good to understand that the essence of his thought lies in the interaction between the past, the present, and the future. Awards and recognitions. Eliot received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1948, we already said, the Order of Merit in January in the same year, the Hanseatic Goth Prize in 1954, then the Gold Medal in 1959. Eliot was recognized as an officer de la Legends, the honor. This is all about Eliot. Try to read, try to understand, and try to mug up some of his important words also.